Our next presentation is Ozone Calibration, There's More to It, presented by Chris Wills of the Mojave Desert AQMD.
Hello and welcome. I am Chris Wills and I am from the Mojave Desert Air Quality Management District, and I am here to present on ozone calibration. So without any delay, let's get started. The purpose for this presentation was due to the demand for technicians to see the how, what, and whys of calibration, and since ozone is tested quite prominently by all districts, it seemed to be the best candidate. With that said, we can see if we are going about calibration the same way, if we are encountering the same problems, and how we go about handling them. This gives us opportunity to share experiences and open up further dialogue and outreach. Okay, this is a busy slide, but it is a disclaimer. But disclaimers are always busy. So with that, let me go on to summarize. One, we have the Teledyne 400 series analyzers at the district along with the Teledyne 701 ZAG. So this presentation is based using the tools available to us. Number two, we have our own practices in place that might differ a little bit from yours. And three, this presentation is for the biggest audience, so yes, some of the stuff may seem trivial. Finally to note, I had to videotape this with only one hand, but I did my best to clean up this video. So back to the trivial. Ozone is a very reactive gas of 3 oxygen atoms. While it is up high, it builds a UV shield for us, but when it is produced down low, it affects our general health. The Ozone Gas Analyzer, front, rear, and internal views. This slide shows the primary components of the ozone analyzer. Centermost, you have the bench with the UV lamp and detector, which also houses a photometer tube. More details in video form on that later. We have the motherboard and PC card in the rear, which is the brains of the unit. The power supply board, which converts the power to the two necessary levels of 5 volts and 12 volts, which then feed the relay board, which distributes the power to the necessary components. We have the measure reference valve that switches between scrubbed and unscrubbed gas. Next, the flow pressure meters, and finally the flow controller, which houses the centric filter orifice assembly. No pump is in this unit, as we use external pumps as the internal ones fail. Understanding the parts and pieces of your analyzer is key for repairs, maintenance, and troubleshooting. This is especially true when you are calibrating and encounter any problems. Hand in hand, understanding the parts goes with understanding the flow. We have the sample coming in the blue to the filter, followed by the green to the measure reference valve and scrubber assembly, which shifts about every 3 seconds, pink through the photometer and the pressure flow boards, and then finally red through the orifice assembly to the exhaust. Ozone gas analyzer theory. The ozone gas flows down the absorption tube opposite to the direction of the UV light. We have 250 nanometer source UV is absorbed by the ozone present in that tube. The detector at the end quantifies the signal strength, and our reference measure valve switches between the sample air and the ozone-free air to provide a calculation utilizing Beer's law. The ozone gas calibrator. Much more complicated, but hopefully doesn't require as much maintenance since it isn't running 24/7 like the site gas analyzer. It too is an analyzer with the same expected parts, but has extra components to generate the ozone, regulate flows, and provide closed loop feedback. The photometer and the mass flow controllers are certified by the CARB Standards Lab. The standard reference photometer comes into play since ozone is very unstable and it is not a gas you can store up in a bottle, but rather have to generate on the spot by filtering a UV lamp at 185 nanometers. The standard labs complete comparisons against higher level standard, and a certification report is created with a true ozone calculation, which is required to correct your values displayed on the transfer standard itself. Calibration. the comparison of two measurement values derived by a device under test against another of known accuracy. In the air monitoring world, we utilize calibration in terms of as found and as left. As found is verification that requires no adjustment and the unit can be left at its current state. As left is when the adjustment is required in either the form of a zero adjustment or a span adjustment. So when do we calibrate? On a time schedule, when we encounter drift, new unit or new location, and after a repair. When shouldn't we calibrate? Immediately prior to an audit, during an ozone episode, like in the middle of the day in summer. This is, of course, unless you really have to and you're questioning your data already. And also when you believe there's something else wrong with the instrument and you would just be masking a problem. Setting up the calibrator tubing. You can go through the inlet, which is the ideal method because you capture the effects or influence from a greater portion of your sample path, but this is not always practicable. You may also connect it to manifold, but this covers less of the sample path. And finally, you can connect to the back of the instrument itself. This may be completed if you don't want to interrupt sampling from the other analyzers at the site. This video shows the NUMA view format opposed to the legacy view. There is a warm-up feature that will be shown here on the bottom right, which is currently reading false. After roughly half an hour of warm-up time, your measurement changes from a false measurement to a true measurement. And you cannot generate ozone until this is complete. We also have tubing set aside designated for calibration only. You don't want to mix in any old exhaust pump tubings into your newly conditioned and clean tubing. And we traditionally set up our calibrator unit as if it were the site nightly challenging unit, in our case a 9100 Environics. We typically use the same tubing for the diluent coming from the ZAG as well as the 9100 challenging unit to the manifold. And setup also requires the use of a scrubber at the exhaust port. The four bottom ports comprise a single internal manifold with two cal gas out, one photometer, and one vent. Sometimes the exhaust vent ports can cause restrictions, which is noticeable at the low levels and at zero. Next, the back pressure compensation function needs to be run. Note that the back pressure compensation is only accessible during the standby mode. So if you were currently generating, you would have to go to standby and then have that window available for back pressure compensation. This is a brief video with the generation of ozone with the T703U with NumaView, and we show the comparison with the Ozone Analyzer under test. We have set points of 200, 150, and so forth. Also to note is when you generate on this instrument, the true ozone value is the value that is calculated utilizing the certification equation provided by the Standards Laboratory, their ozone certification report. And we incorporate that equation with our calibration report, which is in the upcoming slides. Here we're showing our 150 point and so forth. This is the calibration minute data from the video presentation. As you can see, we start out with ambient roughly at 60 parts per billion. Then we run zero momentarily to see what kind of measurements or stability we are seeing. Here the graph moves downward. Next, we initiate the back pressure compensation, which uses zero. The three peaks represent the time between back pressure compensation where ambient air is being drawn in. As you can see, it took 3 tries before I felt comfortable moving forward. Note, it took almost the same amount of time to generate a good stable zero than it did to run the 5 points. Taking the time to have a stable instrument makes the rest of the process run a lot smoother. This is a sample of our ozone calibration report. The left page is the as found, the right page is the as left. Also note this calibration I completed on a unit that had a cross valve leak in the measure reference valve. Our calibration report contains the general information such as to be expected along with the transfer standard information, the analyzer's slopes and offset. We also show the health parameters of the instrument at both 0 and span levels. This is a way you can check the health of the internal manganese dioxide scrubber of the T400, but it's not foolproof, as we will see. This is the bottom half of the first page, the as found section. We have the percent error at each set point, which is not to exceed 5%. But for the low point, we have the 1.5 ppb, which is acceptable at the 15 level. And then on the bottom, we have our best fit line graph with the 2.1 error from best fit line. This is the second page, the as left portion. It is a repeat basically of the as found, but also contains comments for any maintenance that may have been performed that would signify why it required an adjustment. This is the bottom portion of the same page, which is identical to the as found. It shows that we met specification after any repair, maintenance, or adjustment. It also serves to bracket data moving forward. But even after all the calibration work put in, sometimes there are just other factors. Story 1, we had ash buildup inside the unit from wildfires. Here is a video of the necessary cleaning and repair of that instrument. An actual bug in the unit. Dirty optics, pretty bad. This required also some boards to be replaced. The photometer was removed, cleaned, and those optics that you saw were cleaned. And reassembled. Sometimes calibration doesn't help. Story 2, ozone scrubber bias to our ZAG RH. At one of our sites, we had a unit fail and a spare loaner unit went out in its place until the original could be repaired. The ambient data appeared low for the loaner unit, but all the nightly QC and calibration verifications passed without any problem. The unit would have passed any audit, and we could just see that just seemed low, but all our documentation was saying that the instrument was fine. When we looked at the zero versus span scrubber comparison through the measure reference millivoltage data in the calibration report, it also appeared fine. We continued with multiple calibrations in order to see if we can get the ambient to come up. Finally, we got our site unit back and running, and the data proved that our ambient was low, as you can obviously see in the graph. For some reason, the scrubber was not doing its job with the ambient air. The dry ZAG air for QC did not require scrubbing from the T400, whereas the ambient air did. And since the scrubber was not doing its job, the ambient data was measured lower. Also, if you look at the tail end, you can see that the data started to come together again. This happened after we tapped on the scrubber and loosened up the manganese dioxide and perhaps exposed more surface area. But we could see that this was only momentarily occurring, and it starts to spread out and run apart again. Sometimes calibration doesn't help. Story 3. Pressure and flow concerns when calibrating a single analyzer site with a T connection in place of a manifold. When you're dealing with a smaller volume, pressure changes are far more drastic. There's a higher percent difference with the smaller numbers. Using a complete manifold setup helps buffer or act as a dampener for these changes. But we amplify this pressure influence when we start measuring at very low points. It's not uncommon to calibrate a site like this multiple times to get the same and you see some spread in results. Not that any is absolutely wrong, but being off by 3 ppb at 150 set point is not problematic, roughly 2%. But when we hit 15 ppb, we're towing the line and quite often have to repeat the calibration. So once again, your initial setup and back pressure compensation is key. So how do we avoid some of these problems? Good maintenance practices, attempt to be proactive instead of reactive, and here's a list of some common maintenance. Tricks of the trade. Very busy slide, but I want it to be available for reference. So let me summarize. First point, try to have a spare unit available, preferably one that's not going to read low ambient, unless you really need that, I guess. Number 2, if the slope goes up, it would usually indicate a leak in your analyzer, a breakthrough through your measure reference scrubber, a cross-port leak at the measure reference valve. If slope goes down, it could be the calibrator has a leak itself or some external factor on the analyzer. Next one, keep up with your flow components. Orifice maintenance flow is pretty solid. If we take good measures to keep it in good working order, it's gonna work out for you. If your calibrations are not making any progress, you can always reset it back to the original set point that you had before you started. Just note that the degree of precision for a calculated value is less than a computer generated value, which is roughly 6 decimal places. Keep an eye on your lamp voltages so that you won't lose any data once it gets too low. I believe it's at roughly 2500 millivolts. We've experienced new lamps fail right away. Sometimes a simple power cycling will reset the position of the plasma ball in the lamp. And then finally on this page, run through your leak checks and your parts. Continuing on, leave dates on newly installed parts to save time in the future. Save yourself digging through the logbook. Don't max out a potentiometer. This is likely to cause increased noise to the detector and can throw off your 4096 reference voltage. Negative spikes can occur from zero error if you have a bad scrubber. Check the firmware on your calibrator so that the back pressure compensation is running at the same flow rate of your calibration. So it'll calculate at the same flow, which is quite helpful. That's a new addition to Teledyne. Use the Cal gas out manifold to your advantage. That's the one with the four ports. For setup, you could use it for dampening purposes. Valve flickering is the primary reason that you would have to do this. And with the compensation, it's going to help keep a stable zero, which is key for those low points. Keep good documentation practices in place. Make sure that you list what zag you used, if whether it was a site zag or your standard zag number 2. What was your final back pressure compensation? Be sure to list similar comments in your calibration report as well. This is just a sample of our general site logbook. We keep one as a general for the site and we have one specific to the instrument, which covers more details. So now in closing, make sure to learn your equipment, recognize the components and the flow paths of your analyzer. Having a well-maintained analyzer is easier to calibrate than a neglected one. Make sure you use your time, leaving a time for warm-ups and setups. Take your time to do things right, and it will save you for the actual calibration times. Keep good notes for yourselves and others so that others can repeat what you've done or explain it to perhaps an auditor or a boss. Special thanks to my coworker Jennifer Eberwein, my Curriculum Advisory Committee, the CAC, and to the techie crew at Teledyne, who are always more than anxious to answer any of my questions. So thank you for your time, and we're open for any questions and comments.
Great. Thanks, Chris, for that presentation. You can go ahead and join me on video now. So I see a question from Olin. How did the unit get so much ash in it through the particulate filter?
That's a very good question, actually. That was during when we were having the fires, and also we did keep a monthly change on those filters, so that's a very plausible question why it still penetrates through that. That's obviously built up from a long time, and we had only been here for a little while. We're fairly new to this district and incorporate our new practices, so hopefully the new practices will alleviate that from the future. But that was just, I would have to say, a lot of neglect over time, and we have since corrected some of those issues. But I would hope to say that it was more fire than anything else. It was along the that site was near the mountainous area where we did incur a lot of fires, so that would be the majority of it. But we didn't expect it to be that bad for sure when we opened it up.
Got another question here. Do you calibrate your instrument through the manifold or through the back of the analyzer? What PPB do you use for conditioning of your lines before cal?
So let's see, do you calibrate instrument through the manifold? Yes, currently we do it through the manifold. We're moving to go through the whole sample path. So at the inlet probe, which we're currently making modifications to do so. So most of them are through the manifold, but we're looking forward to going through the inlet probe as well. What PPB do you use for conditioning your lines before cal? Usually buy that tubing in bulk, and we'll run it at roughly 200 ppb or 500 ppb, and we'll condition it for, I would guess, maybe 15 hours. We run it for multiple days while we're at the site.
Another question here. How many health parameters from the instrument are you logging and using to diagnose issues?
How many health parameters? On a monthly basis, we take pretty much everything that's on the screen. It's a little different between NumaView versus Legacy, because you could set certain screens that you want or certain metadata. But we do take everything that's available on the legacies. And what are you logging? So we log those on a monthly basis. We also have our data logger that monitors our flows. So that gives us an alert, for instance, if there's some type of flow concern or if there's a power outage. We get those through AirVision, and our data is automatically flagged for us. So, but honestly, day-to-day review of your data, keeping up on that is going to help you discover these problems. Let's see here.
Okay. Are your sites plumbed for TTP QC checks through the probe QC checks?
The one is currently in progress, and so we have one that just recently, maybe 2 weeks ago, that we just started that. So one of our 7 sites is, and we plan on moving in that direction. So we're going to be working on our second site to do the same. But at the time that that I did this presentation, it wasn't set up that way, but it is now.
Okay, good presentation. Did I hear you
Sorry,
say
I'm
that?
getting some. I'm not getting volume sound from you. I'm seeing the next question. Did I hear you say that removed internal pump are using external pump for you? Yes, that's true. We use an external Thomas pump. Mostly it seems cost efficient. When we first get an ozone analyzer. Oh, let's see here. Sorry, they're getting.
I'll ask the question out loud so people can hear. Okay. So just for future recording purposes too, good presentation. Did I hear you say that you removed the internal pump and are using an external pump on your ozone analyzer? I've always heard that affects the FEM status.
I have not heard that. We've been audited with it being external. We've changed them after our internal ones fail. But it shouldn't have any effect because your flow controller is actually the key component for maintaining your flow. So as long as you have the right draw on that orifice, it should be fine. And running your checks on your flow with your flow meter with your maintenance confirms that your display flow is correct. That meets the criteria for your FEM status. So I haven't heard that, but we've been running it like that. We've been audited like that, and it's been working fine for us.
Okay, have you noticed the output flow change on the 703 between the measure reference cycle? And is it some of the challenges you found getting good back pressure compensation?
Have you noticed the output flow change? The 703, I haven't noticed a flow change on the 703. That I'd have to look into that some more. I know that we see the pressure differences occur, the blipping, but I do know that the valving itself is you can't adjust the flow on the 703. It's actually just preset with a manual control. Whereas a 700, you type in your expected flow rates. I'd have to look at that some more. That's something I'd have to get back to you on.
And was that pump change on a T400 or a 400E?
The pump change meaning the external pump, we've done on both. So the only new units that have the internal pumps are probably the only units that we use an internal pump on. So once they fail and we don't have a replacement, we've gone to the external Thomas pumps. So, but we've used the external pump on both the T400 and the 400E.
We have seen about a 1 liter change continuously when running ozone.
Sorry, I'm getting a little lag on you. Let's see.
Oh, sorry.
We have seen about 1 liter change continuously when running ozone. Okay, on a 703. Yeah, I'd have to review that. Olin Bailey. I will get back to you. I have to look at some of my documentation on that.
Great. I don't see any other questions. So we can, oh, there's one more. We have found that through the probe, plumbing is impacting concentration in a way that BPC, I don't know the acronym, does not correct back pressure, does not correct in an expected way. This is in comparison to verification of our field standards at the lab using a T. In short, a loss of 5 to 6 ppb that kills our low points during cal. Correcting via a slope change leads to failure. Meet the slope criteria of the EPA, to meet the slope criteria of the EPA.
Okay, they have found that. So that's going to be new to us. We're going to, we'll be learning about that soon because we've recently transferred one station to be the same. And that's information I probably have to get back to you once we see what results we come about with that change as well. Our nightly QC has been fine, but we haven't calibrated through that same sample path as of yet. So like I said, this just happened recently. Okay. So that's something I'll have to get back.
I think we've run out of time for this session. So if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to Chris on Buildup or email.
My email will be great.
We will join the next session now. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.